The United States has laid out the conditions it expects Canada to meet during the review of their key free trade deal. Conditions the U.S. Trade Representative says must be met in order to keep CUSMA for the long term.
And a lot of it comes down to booze, milk, and cheese. The ongoing provincial ban on American liquor has really hit a nerve here in Washington.
Breaking tonight, Washington asked for everything and just discovered how little power it actually has. What just happened between the United States and Canada is being misunderstood as stubbornness, as attitude, as political theater. It's not. It's leverage being revealed, and then quietly flipped. When Donald Trump's team put 5 demands on the table, the expectation inside Washington was simple. Canada would negotiate. Canada would bend. Canada would trade concessions for stability. Instead, Mark Carney said no. Not loudly, not emotionally, just cleanly, to every single demand. And that moment changed the entire balance of power in North American trade. Because here's the truth nobody in Washington wants to say out loud: you don't demand 5 things from a country you don't need. You demand 5 things when you're running out of options. Each demand wasn't pressure. It was a confession. Let's start with dairy. The United States didn't ask for dairy access because it believes in free markets. It asked because American dairy producers are struggling. Global prices are unstable. Europe is saturated. Asia is competitive. And Canada's market, stable, protected, predictable, looks like a lifeline. Carney didn't hesitate. He shut the door immediately. Not just politically, but legally. Canada locked supply management into law. No future government can trade it away quietly. That wasn't defiance. That was insulation. Then came digital media. Washington framed it as fairness. In reality, it was about money. Billions in ad revenue. Streaming income. Algorithmic control. Canada's digital laws force American tech giants to invest locally instead of extracting endlessly. That hurts Silicon Valley. So Washington labeled it discrimination. Carney labeled it sovereignty. Because once a country gives up control over its media space, it never gets it back. And Canada knows exactly what happens when smaller cultures rely on foreign platforms for visibility. Next came alcohol bans. The U.S. demanded Canada remove retaliatory bans while keeping tariffs in place. That wasn't negotiation. That was submission dressed as compromise. Carney didn't argue. He didn't escalate. He simply refused to absorb punishment without relief. That message traveled far beyond Ottawa. Then procurement. Washington accused Canadian provinces of favoritism while maintaining Buy American rules across federal contracts, defense spending, and infrastructure funding. The contradiction was obvious, and Carney let it sit there. No counterattack. No speech. Just silence, because hypocrisy doesn't need a rebuttal. It collapses under its own weight. Finally, energy. This is where the illusion of American dominance truly broke. The United States imports nearly 4 million barrels of Canadian oil every single day. Entire refinery systems, especially in the Gulf Coast, were designed around Canadian crude. New England states rely on Canadian electricity to survive winter peaks. Energy doesn't flow one way. And Carney knows that if this relationship fractures, the pain doesn't land in Ottawa first. It lands in American homes, American factories, and American fuel prices. This is why refusing everything was the smartest move Canada could make. Because saying no forced Washington to confront something it hasn't faced in decades: dependence. The silence around autos proves it. The U.S. didn't list automobiles among its demands, not because autos aren't important, but because they're too important to threaten. North American auto manufacturing is stitched together across borders. Parts cross the Canada-US line multiple times before a car is finished. Break the trade agreement, and the system doesn't bend. It breaks. Detroit knows it. Suppliers know it. Workers know it. That's why the loudest pressure isn't coming from Canada. It's coming from inside the United States. And then there's China. Carney's targeted trade arrangement wasn't about replacing America. It was about proving Canada has alternatives. Options change behavior. When a country has no alternatives, it negotiates out of fear. When it has even a few, it negotiates out of confidence. Washington noticed immediately. The threats came fast. The tone changed. The messaging turned hostile. Because leverage only works when the other side believes you're the only door. Carney just showed Canada has more than one. That's what truly unsettled Washington. And while Trump posted, canceled invitations, and escalated rhetoric, something quieter happened. Canada prepared. Domestic procurement expanded. Critical mineral strategies tightened. European relationships deepened. Provincial governments aligned. This wasn't reaction. It was preparation revealing itself. By the time the trade review arrives, this won't be a desperate negotiation. It will be a test of whether Washington understands the new reality. Because the old assumption that Canada needs the US more than the US needs Canada is no longer safe. And the most uncomfortable truth for Washington is this. Trump didn't weaken Canada by demanding too much. He exposed how much the United States stands to lose. 5 demands, 5 refusals. And for the first time in a generation, the pressure isn't on Ottawa, it's on Washington. And that pressure is already starting to crack. Because when the spotlight turns inward, Washington has to answer questions it has avoided for years. What happens if Canada doesn't fold? What happens if tariffs stay? What happens if the closest ally stops treating American demands as unavoidable? The truth is, the US doesn't have a clean exit. Pulling back sounds tough on television, but in real life it hits voters fast. Higher fuel prices, disrupted supply chains, factory layoffs, empty shelves, the kind of pain that shows up before the next election cycle even starts. That's why the messaging from Washington keeps shifting. One day it's threats, the next day it's productive talks, then it's silence.